Ethan Johnson, at 27 years old, had everything anyone could dream of. He was the only son of Mr. James and Mrs. Mary Johnson, one of the wealthiest families in the country. His father owned a large empire of companies, while his mother was a renowned philanthropist. Ethan had grown up in luxury, surrounded by expensive cars, grand mansions, and all the finest things money could buy. However, despite all the riches, Ethan felt something was missing. People around Ethan always seemed more interested in his family's fortune than in him as a person. He had friends, but over time, he realized they cared more about his lifestyle than who he really was. The women he dated were the same, interested in his wealth and status, but never his heart. Ethan longed to be loved for who he truly was, not for his family's wealth. One evening, after a particularly shallow conversation with a woman his father had introduced him to, Ethan knew something had to change. This woman, like so many others, was more interested in impressing him with her wealth than learning anything about him. He wanted more. He wanted a life where he could be himself and find love not based on his family's name, but on who he truly was. Ethan decided that he needed to leave his life of privilege behind, at least for a little while. He wanted to experience the world outside his bubble, to live simply, and discover if he could find love in a place where no one knew his background. Before he made any drastic decisions, Ethan sat down with his parents to discuss his plan. They were sitting in the large dining room of their mansion. "I've been thinking about something for a while," Ethan began, his heart racing. "I want to leave the city for a while. I need time to find myself away from everything here." His mother, Mrs. Mary, immediately frowned. "Leave, Ethan. You're a young man. The world outside is harsh, especially for a boy like you. You don't need to go anywhere. We can find you a good wife here, someone who will love and care for you." Ethan sighed, knowing his mother wouldn't understand. "But that's the problem, Mom. All the women I meet are only interested in what I have, not in me. I want to live a simple life for a while, away from all this. I want to find someone who loves me for who I am." Mrs. Mary shook her head. "It's not safe out there for a boy like you. What if something happens? How will you survive without the comfort and protection of this home? You don't need to struggle when everything you need is right here." Ethan looked at his father, hoping for support. Mr. James, a stern but thoughtful man, had been listening quietly. "I won't be gone forever," Ethan said, turning to his father. "I just need some time to figure things out. If I don't find what I'm looking for, if I can't find love on my own, I'll come back. I'll agree to marry the woman you want me to marry." His father raised an eyebrow. "You mean the tech billionaire's daughter, Diana, whom you have adamantly refused to meet?" "Yes," Ethan nodded. "I'll meet her eventually, but first I need to do this. I need to know if I can live a life where people see me for me, not for our name." Mr. James leaned back in his chair, considering his son's words. He loved Ethan dearly, and as much as he wanted him to marry someone powerful like Diana, he understood his need for independence. He had seen his frustration over the years, trying to find someone who valued him for more than his wealth. Mrs. Mary, however, was not convinced. "James, tell him this is a bad idea. He's the Johnson heir, our only child. He can't just wander off on his own. The world isn't as kind as it seems, especially for someone who's never known hardship. It's dangerous." But Mr. James gave Ethan a small nod of approval. "If this is what you need to do, Ethan, then I'll support you. I don't want you to regret not trying to find your own path." He turned to his wife. "He's strong, Mary. We have to trust him." Mrs. Mary sighed, still uneasy. "Fine, but promise me you'll be careful, Ethan." "I will, Mom," Ethan said with a smile. "I won't be gone long. I just need time away from all the trouble here." And with that, Ethan's plan was set. He packed a small suitcase with only simple clothes, leaving behind his expensive suits, watches, and the life of luxury he had always known. The next day, with his father's reluctant blessing and his mother's worried gaze, Ethan left the city. He boarded a bus to a faraway place, hoping to start fresh. The city he chose was Makalani, a small but bustling town known for its vibrant markets and hard-working people. It was a place where no one would recognize him as the wealthy heir from the capital. Here, Ethan could blend in and live a simple life just like anyone else. When Ethan arrived in Makalani, he found a small one-room apartment to rent. It was nothing like the mansion he had grown up in, but it was enough for him. The apartment had only a bed, a table, and a window that looked out onto the busy streets below. There were no luxuries, no servants to cater to his every need, but for the first time in his life, Ethan felt free. Now that he was settled, Ethan knew he needed to find a job. He couldn't live off his family's wealth if he truly wanted to experience life as an ordinary person. After walking around the streets of Makalani for a few days, he came across a small restaurant called Mama Kay's Kitchen. The diner had a cozy, inviting atmosphere with the smell of home-cooked meals filling the air. It was always busy with people coming and going, and something about the simplicity of the place drew Ethan in. With his heart racing, Ethan walked inside and asked Mama Kay, the owner, if she had any job openings. Mama Kay was a kind woman in her mid-50s with a round face and a warm smile. She looked Ethan over, noticing his neat but modest clothes, and asked a few questions. Satisfied with Ethan's answers, Mama Kay decided to give him a chance. "We can use another waiter around here," Mama Kay said. "But it's tough work. You'll be on your feet all day, serving tables, cleaning up, and dealing with all kinds of customers. Do you think you can handle it?" Ethan smiled, determined to prove himself. "Yes, I can handle it. I'll do my best." And so, Ethan began his new life as a waiter at Mama Kay's Kitchen. The work was much harder than he had ever imagined. He spent long hours on his feet, carrying trays of food, cleaning tables, and taking orders. His back ached, and his hands became rough from the constant cleaning. But despite the exhaustion, Ethan found a sense of purpose in this simple life. For the first time, he was living a life that wasn't handed to him on a silver platter. The customers at Mama Kay's Kitchen were regular people, workers, families, and students who came in for affordable meals. They treated Ethan just like any other waiter, and that's exactly what he wanted. He was no longer the rich heir from a powerful family. He was just Ethan, the new waiter at the restaurant. As Ethan wiped down a table one evening, he looked out at the busy streets of Makalani and smiled to himself. He had left behind the world of wealth and privilege, but in doing so, he had found something more valuable. Freedom. He wondered what the future held. Would he find the love he had been searching for, or would he eventually return to his old life, marrying the woman his father wanted? For now, he was content to wait and see. This was his time to find out who he truly was, and his journey had only just begun. As Ethan continued working at Mama Kay's Kitchen, his life in Makalani began to settle into a routine. The work was still exhausting, but the sense of independence he felt made it worthwhile. However, everything changed one evening when Tanya, the kind marketing assistant he had gotten to know over the past few weeks, asked him out on a friendly date. It had been a long day at the restaurant, and Ethan was busy cleaning up when Tanya, with her usual warm smile, approached him. "Hey, Ethan," she said casually, leaning against the counter. "I was wondering, would you like to have dinner with me sometime? I know a quiet spot by the river." Ethan's heart rose. He had grown fond of Tanya's company over the past few weeks. She seemed genuine, down to earth, and different from the women he had known back in his old life. There was no pretense, no showy displays of wealth, just simple, honest conversations. And more importantly, he thought, she didn't know anything about his background. To Tanya, he was just Ethan, the waiter. He also admired her boldness in taking the initiative. Smiling, he agreed, "I'd love that." Their first few dates were wonderful. Tanya, who was more familiar with the town, took him to quiet, simple places where they could talk, laugh, and enjoy each other's company. She listened to his stories about working at the diner, shared her experiences as a marketing assistant, and made him feel special. Ethan felt himself opening up to her, thinking that maybe he had finally found the love he was looking for, here in this small town with a woman who didn't know he was an heir. It seemed possible. But as the weeks went by, Ethan began to notice small, troubling signs in his relationship with Tanya. It started with her borrowing small amounts of money. "Hey, Ethan, could you lend me a little cash? I've got an urgent bill to pay and my paycheck got delayed," she said casually one evening. At first, Ethan didn't think much of it. He had saved some money from his work at the diner, and it wasn't a big deal to help her out. After all, he was the man, And even if he was acting poor, he still needed to take care of his woman the little way he could. But then, it happened again and again. Each time, Tonya had a reason, a broken laptop, an unexpected expense, or a favor she needed to return. The amounts were small at first, but they quickly added up. Ethan found himself dipping into his savings more and more, but he didn't want to think the worst. After all, Tonya didn't know he was wealthy. She couldn't possibly be using him for money. However, as time passed, Ethan started noticing other things. Tonya often spoke about how he could aim higher in life, hinting that he should be doing more than just working at the diner. "You're smart, Ethan," she said one afternoon as they sat by the river. "Why settle for waiting? You could be doing bigger things. You are a man. Don't you think it's belittling?" The way she said it made him feel uneasy, as though she knew something about him that she wasn't saying. She seemed to push him towards something greater, as if she expected more from him than he was willing to reveal. Ethan brushed it off at first, thinking she just wanted to motivate him, but the nagging feeling in his chest grew stronger with each passing day. Then came the afternoon that shattered his world. It was a quiet day at the diner, and Ethan had just finished his shift. He was walking out the back when he saw Tonya leaning against the wall, talking on her phone. She didn't notice his approach, so he stopped, curious to hear what she was saying. "Yeah, girl, it's going well," Tonya said, her voice low but confident. "I'm close to getting more out of him. I'm telling you, calm down. You know these rich kids can be spoiled. I followed him here to Makalani. Imagine the heir to the Johnson Empire pretending to be poor. All these entitled kids and their weird fantasies," she added with a loud laugh. Ethan froze in place. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Tonya knew who he was all along. She had followed him to Makalani. "Yeah, his dad's the billionaire. I found out where he went after he left the city. He's trying to live a quiet life or something, but I'm working on it. He's already giving me money. It won't be long before I get more out of him, make him marry me and take me back with him so I can be the billionaire's wife. By then I would be recognized as the one who stood with him when he had nothing." She laughed sarcastically. Ethan clenched his fist, anger burning through him. Every moment they had shared, every conversation, every smile, it was all a lie. Tonya hadn't cared about him as Ethan the waiter. She had only seen him as Ethan Johnson, the rich heir. She had known all along and had used him just like the others. With his heart shattered, Ethan stepped forward, his voice trembling with anger. "So this was your plan all along?" Tonya turned sharply, her eyes wide with shock. "Ethan, don't—" He held up a hand to stop her. "I heard everything. You knew who I was, and you followed me here just to use me." Tonya opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The guilt on her face was enough for Ethan to know the truth. Without waiting for an explanation, he turned and walked away. He had trusted her and believed that he had found something real, but it had all been a facade. Tonya had been playing him from the very beginning. That night, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't stay in Makalani any longer. The town had become tainted by the betrayal he had suffered. He needed to go somewhere even more remote, somewhere where no one would find him and where he could truly start over. He packed his things, his heart heavy with disappointment, and called his parents. His mother answered first, her voice filled with concern. "Ethan, darling, are you all right? You haven't called in a while." "I'm fine, Mom," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I need more time. I'm leaving Makalani. I need space." Sensing something was wrong, his mother began to protest. "Ethan, you're a young man. We can send someone to—" "I'll be fine," Ethan interrupted. "I'll keep in touch, but not as often. Please don't worry about me. I just need to figure things out on my own." His father, who had been listening quietly in the background, spoke up. "We trust you, Ethan. But remember, you can always come home. You don't have to do this alone." Ethan sighed, his heart aching with both sadness and gratitude. "I know, Dad. I'll be okay." And with that, Ethan ended the call. He was determined to move forward, to find himself once again in a place where no one knew his past. He didn't know where his journey would take him, but one thing was certain. He would never let anyone take advantage of him again. Ethan had left the bustling life of Makalani behind. After Tonya's betrayal, he knew he needed a complete change of scenery. something far from the town life he had grown used to. He wanted to find peace away from the people who might recognize him or take advantage of his wealth. With his heart still heavy from disappointment, Ethan decided to move to a rural village far from the hustle and bustle of the city. The village he chose was small and quiet, with dusty roads, simple houses, and a slower pace of life. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the biggest excitement was market day, and where strangers were noticed. Ethan was sure that no one here would know about his past, his family, or the riches he had left behind. He had become skilled at keeping his identity hidden, and in this village, he could start over once again. After settling into a modest room he rented from an old widow, Ethan decided he needed to find a job. His savings were running low, and he wanted to earn his way like any ordinary person. As he walked through the village one sunny afternoon, he passed a small supermarket and noticed a handwritten sign in the window. "Salesboy needed." It seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without hesitation, Ethan walked inside and asked the shopkeeper if the job was still available. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, introduced himself as Mr. Paul. He asked a few simple questions about Ethan's experience and background. Sticking to his story, Ethan told him he had finished secondary school and had worked odd jobs in other towns before arriving here. Mr. Paul seemed satisfied with his answers and hired him on the spot. "You can start tomorrow," he said, handing him an apron. "It's nothing too hard, just stocking shelves, helping customers, and keeping the place tidy." Ethan thanked him and left the supermarket feeling relieved. This was exactly what he needed. A simple job in a quiet village, far away from the painful memories of Tonya and Makalani. The next morning, he arrived at the supermarket ready to begin his new role. That's where he met Jude. Jude was the other salesboy at the supermarket. He was in his early 20s, with bright eyes and a friendly smile. He was quick to welcome Ethan, and they soon became friends. Jude was easy to talk to, and as they worked side by side, they shared stories about their lives. Ethan told Jude that he was an orphan who had only completed secondary school, carefully sticking to his fabricated story. He didn't want anyone here to know who he really was, not after what had happened in the past. Jude, in turn, shared his dreams and hopes with Ethan. "I stay with my uncle and aunt," Jude said one day as they restocked the shelves. "They're nice, but the village is too small for me. I want more from life." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, curious. "I want to make it big. Life is hard. Hustling is hard too for me. I wouldn't mind marrying a rich woman if I see one," Jude replied with a determined look in his eyes. "I want to leave this village, move to the big city, and live a better life. I've always dreamed of driving luxury cars and living in a nice house. This place is too small for me." Ethan nodded, understanding his friend's ambition. Jude was sweet, but it was clear that he had his sights set on finding a way out of the village. He talked often about meeting a woman who would change his life, someone who could offer him the luxury and comfort he longed for. Ethan, on the other hand, was running away from that very life, but he understood why Jude dreamed of escaping poverty. The days at the supermarket passed quietly. Ethan felt a sense of peace working alongside Jude, listening to the village gossip and learning about the customers who came in regularly. It was a simple life, but for Ethan, it was healing. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to be pursued for his wealth, to be seen as nothing more than the heir to a fortune. But that peace didn't last long. One afternoon, as Ethan was working behind the counter, a woman walked into the supermarket. Her name was Julia. She was well known in the village for being one of the wealthiest people around. She had made a name for herself through her importation of foreign items. Julia owned the biggest house in the village, a grand structure that stood out among the simpler homes. She wasn't fabulously rich by city standards, but in the village, Julia was considered wealthy. She was tall and confident, with an air of authority that immediately caught Ethan's attention. She smiled at him as she approached the counter to pay for her items. "Hello," she said, her voice smooth and pleasant. "I haven't seen you around here before. Are you new to the village?" Ethan smiled politely. "Yes, I am. I've only been here for a few weeks." "Well, welcome," Julia said, handing over her money. "It's nice to have a fresh face in the village." As she walked out, Ethan thought little of the encounter. Julia seemed polite, but he had learned to be careful with his heart after what had happened with Tonya. He had no interest in getting involved in another relationship, especially not so soon after his last disappointment. He was tired of women taking advantage of his simplicity. However, it soon became clear that Julia was interested in him. Over the next few days, she began stopping by the supermarket more often, always finding a reason to talk to Ethan. She complimented him on his work, asked about his day, and made casual conversation. At first, Ethan brushed it off as friendliness, but as her visits became more frequent, he realized she was pursuing him. Jude, who had always dreamed of marrying a rich woman, began to grow jealous. He had set his sights on Julia long before Ethan had arrived in the village. In his eyes, Julia was his ticket out of the village, the person who could give him the life he had always dreamed of. But now, it seemed that Julia had turned her attention to Ethan instead. One afternoon, after Julia had left the supermarket, Jude turned to Ethan with a forced smile. "She likes you, you know?" Ethan looked at him, confused. "Who?" "Julia," Jude replied, his voice tight. "She's been coming here just to see you. I think she is waiting for you to make the first move." Ethan felt a pang of discomfort. "I'm not looking for anything right now," he said softly, trying to reassure Jude. "I'm just focusing on my job." Jude's expression softened a little, but there was still a flicker of envy in his eyes. "I hope so. I've always had my eye on Julia. She's the only person in this village who can give me the life I want. I just haven't dared to approach her yet." Ethan didn't say anything more. He could see how much Jude wanted to leave the village, how much he longed for a life of wealth and comfort. But for Ethan, wealth had only brought heartache. The last thing he wanted was to be caught in another situation where someone's interest in him might be more about what he could offer than who he was. As the days passed, Julia continued to show interest in Ethan, but he kept his distance, unsure whether he could trust her. And though he remained friendly with Jude, the tension between them grew. Ethan could see that Jude's jealousy was simmering just beneath the surface. Once again, Ethan found himself in a situation where his past and his present seemed to collide. He had come to this village to find peace, but it seemed that even here, love and trust were hard to find. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. It was a bright, bustling day, and the local market was alive with activity. Children were playing, running around and laughing as the villagers went about their day. Ethan had just finished his shift at the supermarket and was walking down the road, his thoughts wandering. He noticed a group of girls playing football nearby, their game spilling onto the street. Before he could react, the ball soared through the air, this time arcing toward a woman who had stepped off the curb. Instinctively, Ethan sprinted forward, reaching her just as the ball whistled past. In his rush, he pulled her out of harm's way and steadied her, catching her firmly against his chest. For a moment, everything stopped. She found herself held in his arms, and when she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. The woman he had caught was tall, dark-skinned, and incredibly well-built. Her beautiful face was framed with deep concern that softened into relief, and there was a kindness in her eyes that made his heart race. They stood frozen, their eyes locked, as though the world around them had disappeared. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked, his voice deep and gentle, his arms still around her. The woman, her heart pounding, nodded slowly. "I think so," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smiled, his face softening as he released her. "I'm Anna, by the way," the woman said softly as she steadied herself. "Ethan," he replied, shaking her hand, his pulse still racing. As he walked home later that day, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Anna. There was something about the way she had rested in his hands, and the way he had held her like she belonged there. Something about the kindness in her eyes that made him feel at ease. He didn't know much about her, but something told him he would be seeing her again. And he was right. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Anna began crossing paths more often, whether by coincidence or fate. They quickly fell into a comfortable routine of talking whenever they ran into each other. Anna told him that she was an accountant at the construction site, and like many people in the village, she worked hard to make ends meet. She wasn't wealthy like Julia, but that didn't matter to Ethan. She had a warm heart, and in her presence, Ethan felt safe and happy. Before he knew it, Ethan found himself looking forward to every moment he spent with Anna. They took long walks around the village, talked by the river, and shared stories about their lives. With Anna, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a spark of happiness, a sense of peace. Tonia's betrayal no longer haunted his thoughts. In fact, he barely remembered her at all. Anna was different, and Ethan cherished every second they spent together. But while Ethan's feelings for Anna deepened, Julia, the wealthiest woman in the village, was growing increasingly jealous. Julia had been trying to make Ethan notice her for weeks, and she believed that she should be the one he chose. With her 4-bedroom bungalow, her wealth, and her status in the village, Julia had always assumed that Ethan would come around to seeing her as the best option. But now, with Anna in the picture, Julia's confidence was shaken. Determined to win Ethan over, Julia decided to enlist the help of Jude, Ethan's friend and colleague at the supermarket. Jude, who had once harbored dreams of marrying Julia himself, had hoped that she might eventually choose him. But seeing her growing obsession with Ethan left him bitter and envious. One afternoon, Julia pulled Jude aside in a quiet corner of the supermarket. "Jude," she began, lowering her voice, "I need your help with something." Jude looked at her curiously. "What do you need help with?" "It's Ethan," Julia said, frustration creeping into her tone. "He's spending too much time with that girl from the construction site. You know I'm the better match for him. He needs to realize that. I need you to convince him." Jude felt a pang of jealousy at Julia's words. He had always hoped that she would choose him, but now she was asking him to help her win over Ethan. Despite his envy, he nodded, forcing a smile. "I'll talk to him." That evening after work, Jude approached Ethan as they were cleaning up the supermarket. "Ethan," Jude began, trying to sound casual, "I've noticed something and I think it's time we talk about it." Ethan looked up, sensing a serious conversation coming. "What's on your mind?" Jude hesitated for a moment, then continued. "It's Julia. You know she's been interested in you for a while now. She's got everything, a big house, money, and status. Don't you think you should consider her? She's the best option for you, and not many rich women would fancy a poor man, you know. The fact that she likes you alone makes her a good fit." Ethan sighed, feeling a familiar discomfort rise in his chest. "Jude, I don't feel anything for Julia. I'm not interested in her." Jude frowned, clearly frustrated. "But why not? Most of the men in this village would kill to have a woman like Julia interested in them. She's rich, Ethan. You wouldn't have to worry about anything if you were with her. You don't even have to stress yourself about being the provider." Ethan paused, sensing a deeper question in Jude's words. He had always been careful not to reveal too much about his past, but now it seemed that Jude had picked up on something. "Rich," Ethan repeated, narrowing his eyes. "What do you mean, Jude?" Jude shrugged, his frustration growing. "You act like you've had money your whole life or something, like you don't care that Julia is wealthy. Most men in this village would jump at the chance to be with her." Ethan's heart raced as he realized Jude had no idea about his past. He was tempted to reveal everything about his life as a wealthy heir, about why he had left his old life behind, but instead he chose to keep his secret, at least for now. "I don't care about money, Jude," Ethan said firmly. "I've learned that wealth doesn't bring happiness. What I care about is how I feel when I'm with someone, and when I'm with Anna, I feel something real." Jude let out a short, mocking laugh. "So you'd rather be with Anna, a broke woman who you have to cater to? You could have Julia, who owns the biggest house in the village, and instead you're falling for someone who barely has anything." Ethan's expression hardened. "Yes, I would rather be with Anna. She makes me happy, Jude. And I'm not interested in Julia or her money. Besides, I believe it's my responsibility to take care of my woman. So, if the village boys want her, they can have her." Jude's jealousy flared, and though he tried to hide it, Ethan could see the anger in his eyes. Without another word, Jude turned and left, leaving Ethan standing alone in the quiet supermarket. The tension between them had finally boiled over, but Ethan didn't regret his words. He knew how he felt about Anna, and no amount of persuasion or temptation could change that. As he walked home that evening, Ethan's thoughts returned to Anna. He didn't know where their friendship would lead, but for now, he was content to let it grow naturally. For the first time in a long time, he felt something genuine, something that had nothing to do with wealth, status, or family expectations, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Anna sat back in the small, cozy hotel room, the best one in the village. It wasn't much by city standards, but it was clean and comfortable, and that was enough for her. The room was dimly lit, with simple wooden furniture and a large window overlooking the village. She could hear the faint sounds of people outside, but her mind was far away, lost in thoughts of Ethan. She smiled to herself as she leaned back against the headboard, thinking about him, the way their paths had crossed unexpectedly, the way she had fallen into his arms that day when he tried to shield her from the football. She hadn't expected to meet someone like him when she first arrived in the village. In fact, she hadn't expected much at all when she took on the project. This was supposed to be a short-term escape from the pressure of city life, a way to get away from her parents' endless discussions about her future. But Ethan had changed everything. What Ethan didn't know was that Anna wasn't just any ordinary accountant at the construction site. She was actually Diana Adams, a self-made tech billionaire from one of the wealthiest families in the country. Her parents, well-known socialites in the city, had raised her in a world of privilege and high expectations. Like Ethan, she had grown up surrounded by wealth, but she had made a name for herself with her own business ventures. Diana had moved to the United States in her late teens, where she built her tech company from the ground up. It wasn't long before her innovations in telecommunications technology caught the attention of major corporations, and her success skyrocketed. But along with that success came pressure. Her parents, especially her mother, were always trying to push her towards an arranged marriage with someone they deemed suitable. Most recently, they had been pressuring her to meet the son of Mr. Johnson, the richest man in the city. Diana had resisted the idea of marrying someone just because their families aligned financially. The thought of an arranged marriage felt suffocating to her, especially since she didn't believe in marrying for convenience or status. She wanted something real. When the contract to install telecommunication devices underground in the village had come up, Diana had jumped at the chance to escape the city, if only for a little while. Her team could have handled the project without her, but she saw it as an opportunity to escape the noise, the constant demands of her parents, and the expectations that came with her wealth. For a few weeks, she could be just Anna, a construction worker, and no one would know her real identity. What she hadn't expected was to meet Ethan. The first time she had seen him, she had been struck by his sincerity. He didn't carry the usual airs of the high-class people she was used to back in the city. There was no pretense, no vanity, just a genuine warmth and simplicity about him. He had run right into her that day in the village, and from the moment she had held him in her arms, she had known he was different. She sensed that he didn't see her as anyone special, just another ordinary worker trying to get by in the village, and that was what intrigued her the most. Diana had quickly decided that she liked being just Anna around him. She had told her workers to play along with the idea that she was just a regular accounting clerk on the site. She didn't want Ethan to know about her wealth or her background. She wanted to see if his feelings for her were real, not influenced by her status. In the past, people had been drawn to her for all the wrong reasons: her money, her power, her fame. But Ethan seemed to like her for who she was, or at least for who he thought she was. Diana laughed quietly to herself as she thought about it. It was ironic, really. She had come to the village to get away from her family's demands and their obsession with wealth, and yet here she was, pretending to be someone she wasn't. But for the first time in a long time, she felt free. She didn't have to worry about impressing anyone or living up to her family's name. She could just be Anna, the woman who was slowly falling for a kind, unassuming man who didn't even know her real name. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and ran her hands through her hair. Ethan. She whispered his name softly to herself, smiling at the thought of him. There was something so refreshing about the way he saw the world. He wasn't jaded or cynical like so many people she had met in the city. He wasn't after her money or trying to manipulate her for his own gain. In fact, he seemed completely unaware of her wealth, and that only made her more drawn to him. Diana's thoughts drifted back to their conversations. Every time they talked, he opened up a little more, revealing bits and pieces of his life, though she had sensed there were things he wasn't telling her. He wasn't the only one with secrets, and she respected that. Whatever he was hiding, She figured it was probably just as complicated as her own story. Still, she admired his spirit, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence, even though he was clearly used to simpler things. As Diana sat in her hotel room, staring out the window at the setting sun, she realized something surprising. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about her business, her wealth, or her family's expectations. She wasn't worrying about the latest tech deal or the next big project. All she could think about was Ethan, his smile, his laughter, the way he looked at her with those wide, honest eyes. She hadn't felt this way in a long time, and it made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, she had found something real here in this quiet little village. She had no idea how things would play out. Eventually, Ethan would learn the truth about who she really was, but for now, she was content to let things unfold naturally. She wasn't in a hurry, and she didn't want to ruin the connection they had built by revealing too much too soon. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village, Julia has had enough. She couldn't stop thinking about how Ethan had refused to notice her after all her efforts, so she decided to take things a little further. She would seduce him directly. No man can resist a rich and beautiful woman's charm, she told herself. That evening, Julia set her plan in motion. As the supermarket closed and the last customers drifted away, she waited by the corner, pretending to pick up an item from the shelf until Ethan stepped out. "Ethan," she called softly, "can you help me carry something? It's just down the road, my house isn't far." He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, no problem." Julia led him through the narrow street until they reached a big bungalow. The evening light slanted through the windows, bathing the room in a soft golden light. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coconut oil and fried plantain. "Sit," she said, setting a small dish on the table. "I made something for you. You've been working hard lately." Ethan smiled politely but remained standing. "You didn't have to, Julia. I appreciate it, though." Julia stepped closer. "You're always so serious," she said quietly. "So distant. Don't you ever get lonely here?" Ethan frowned slightly. "I stay busy. That helps." Julia moved nearer, her voice lowering. "You don't have to pretend with me. I notice how you look tired sometimes, how you never let anyone close." She reached up as if to straighten his collar, her fingers lingering longer than they should. "You could let someone care for you." Ethan gently took her hand and moved it away. "Julia, you're a good woman. I don't want to give you the wrong idea." Her eyes flickered, hurt and frustration mingling. "So it's true," she whispered. "It's her, isn't it? That poor girl, what does she have that I don't?" "Julia," Ethan said softly, "please don't do this. You're someone I respect. Let's keep it that way." Her composure broke for a moment. She looked at him with trembling lips. "I could give you everything, Ethan," she murmured. "Comfort, care, someone who understands what you need." He shook his head gently. "I don't want comfort built on confusion. You deserve someone who truly wants to be here with you." Julia turned away, blinking fast to hide her tears. "Go then," she said coldly. "Before I say something I'll regret." Ethan paused at the doorway, his tone calm but firm. "Thank you for dinner, Julia. Take care of yourself." The door closed softly behind him. Julia sank into the chair, her hands shaking. In the quiet, the food grew cold, untouched. The days in the village seemed to grow warmer and more peaceful for Ethan as his bond with Anna deepened. They spent more and more time together, sharing long walks by the river, quiet conversations under the shade of trees, and laughter over simple meals. Ethan found himself looking forward to every moment they spent together. Anna was unlike anyone he had ever known, gentle, humble, and sincere. Her presence in his life had brought a sense of joy he hadn't felt in a long time. With Anna, he felt safe, as though the pain of his past had finally started to heal. Tonia's betrayal and the complexities of his old life seemed like distant memories. Every day he spent with Anna reminded him that love didn't have to be complicated by wealth, status, or power. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt free. As for Diana, in truth, she had never expected to feel this way about someone so soon after arriving in the village. She had come here to escape the pressures of her family and the constant talk of arranged marriages. But Ethan had taken her by surprise. His warmth and sincerity had captivated her from the moment they met, and as their relationship blossomed, she found herself falling for him more each day. One evening, after a quiet dinner by the river, Anna and Ethan sat together, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air was cool, and the village was beginning to settle down for the night. Ethan looked over at Anna and smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. "I'm really glad we met," he said softly. Anna turned to him, her eyes warm with affection. "So am I, Ethan." There was a brief silence between them, the kind of comfortable quiet that only comes when two people truly enjoy each other's presence. Ethan glanced up at Anna, his heart fluttering as he caught the way she was looking at him. It was a look he had never seen before, a mixture of admiration, care, and something deeper. Without thinking, Ethan leaned in just slightly, and Anna, feeling the same pull, closed the small distance between them. Their lips met in a soft, gentle kiss, the world around them fading away. For a moment it was just the two of them, lost in the warmth of that kiss, both feeling the connection between them deepen in a way that words couldn't express. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan blushed, his heart racing. Anna smiled at him, her hand brushing a strand of hair away from his face. Neither of them said a word, but the kiss had said everything. They were no longer just two friends spending time together. There was something much stronger, much deeper, growing between them. As their relationship blossomed, Ethan found himself happier than he had ever been. He had come to the village to escape the complications of his old life, and in Anna, he had found not only love, but also a sense of belonging. But while Ethan's heart was full of joy, there was another person whose feelings had turned bitter and angry. Julia. She had watched from the sidelines as Ethan and Anna grew closer, and she couldn't hide her jealousy any longer. She had once dreamed that Ethan would choose her, and when he didn't, Julia felt betrayed. Now, with Anna in the picture, her anger had reached its boiling point. Jude, on the other hand, finally made up his mind. He will confess his feelings to Julia and make her see him. He would go and visit Julia at her house and see if there was still a chance for him. Maybe, just maybe, he could finally win her attention. He arrived at Julia's house, the largest in the village. Knocking on the door, he felt a strange sense of anticipation. Julia opened the door and greeted him with her usual confident smile, but Jude noticed something different in her demeanor. She seemed distracted, tense even. "Jude," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "What brings you here?" Jude hesitated for a moment, unsure how to start. "I wanted to talk to you about us," he said softly, hoping to find the right words. Julia raised an eyebrow. "Us? I've been waiting, Julia," Jude said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Waiting for you to notice me, to realize that I've always been here for you. But it feels like you've been chasing after Ethan this whole time, even though it's clear he's not interested." Julia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Ethan's different, Jude. He's not like the other guys." Jude felt a wave of anger rise within him. "What do you mean he's different? He's an orphan, just like me. We're from the same village. What makes him so special?" Julia hesitated, then muttered under her breath. "He may be an orphan, but he has a certain class about him. He's not like the local guys." Jude's heart sank. "So what? You think you're too good for the rest of us?" Before Julia could answer, a knock came at the door, and a young man entered, looking nervous and upset. It was a man from the village, one of the quiet types who rarely spoke up. His name was Mark, and he looked distressed. "Julia, we need to talk," Mark said, his voice trembling. Julian watched as Julia's face turned pale. "Not now, Mark," she said, trying to usher him out of the house. "No, we need to talk now," Mark insisted, his voice growing louder. "You need to pay me back what you owe." Yulda's eyes widened in shock as the pieces fell into place. "What's going on?" he demanded. Julia looked cornered, her confidence crumbling. It's nothing, just a misunderstanding. But Mark wasn't backing down. You borrowed a huge sum of money, Julia, promising you'd pay me back with interest. You even slept with me to get it, but now you're trying to deny it? You think I will let such a large sum of money go just because you offered yourself to me? Jude felt his world shatter. The woman he had admired, the woman he had wanted so desperately, was nothing but a liar. Not only had Julia been pursuing Ethan, but now she had manipulated another man and was trying to cover it up. You're unbelievable, Jude spat, disgusted. I thought you were different, but you're just another selfish woman who only cares about herself and how to make more money. Julia didn't even try to explain. She knew Jude was no different. He only admired her money. Jude stormed out of the house, his heart filled with disappointment and anger. Julia had never cared about him, and now he saw her for what she truly was. A woman who only valued men for what they could do for her, not for who they were. Not that she owed him any explanation after all. He wasn't the one she liked, but he had loved and admired her all along, and finding out about this was painful. Meanwhile, as Julia and Jude had their tense conversation, Ethan and Anna's relationship continued to grow. But as much as Anna, Diana enjoyed her time with Ethan, she knew that her time in the village couldn't last forever. The project was nearing its end, and soon she would have to return to the city. The thought of leaving Ethan behind weighed heavily on her heart, but she couldn't keep up the charade of being a construction worker forever. One day, as they walked together through the village, Anna knew it was time to tell Ethan part of the truth. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice serious. Ethan looked up at her, sensing that something was on her mind. What's wrong? Anna took a deep breath, running a hand through her hair. I have to leave the village soon. There's a job opportunity in the city and I can't pass it up. Ethan's heart sank at her words. Leave? For how long? I don't know, Anna replied honestly. But it's important. I've been putting it off for a while, but I can't stay here forever. Ethan looked down at the ground, his heart heavy with the thought of her leaving. He had grown so attached to her, and the idea of her leaving the village left a hollow feeling in his chest. I'm going to miss you, he whispered. Anna smiled gently, reaching for his hand. You don't have to miss me. Ethan looked up at her, confused. What do you mean? Anna hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. Come with me, Ethan. There's nothing for you here in this village. You could have a better life in the city. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. Come with you? Yes, Anna said, her voice filled with sincerity. You don't have to stay here. We could start something new together in the city. Ethan walked quietly beside Anna, his mind spinning with the offer she had just made. Leave the village and go with her to the city. The very thought stirred a mix of emotions in him. Part of him longed to be with Anna. She had brought so much joy and peace into his life, but the city she was speaking of wasn't just any city. It was the same city he had left behind, the same place where his parents lived, and where the life of wealth and privilege that he had abandoned still waited for him. Was he ready to go back? Could he face the world he had run from, even if it was with Anna by his side? Anna squeezed his hand gently as they walked. I know it's a lot to think about, but we could have a good life together, Ethan, a fresh start. I don't want to pressure you, but I care about you, and I don't want to leave you behind. Ethan smiled weakly, his heart torn. I'll think about it, he whispered. I just need some time. Anna nodded, her face soft with understanding. Take all the time you need. Just know that whatever decision you make, I'll support it. As they walked back toward the village, Ethan's mind wandered back to the memories of his old life, the luxury, the expectations, and the emptiness that had followed his every step. He had come here to escape all that, to find something genuine, and now, with Anna, he had found love, the kind of love he had been searching for. While Ethan was deep in thought about his future, Julia had her own struggles to deal with. Her frustration with Ethan and Anna's blossoming relationship had reached its peak, and she felt desperate. After trying to convince Ethan to choose her and realizing that he was never going to change his mind, Julia decided it was time to act. She had spent so much time hoping that Ethan would eventually notice her. Ethan had finally made a decision. He had spent days thinking about Anna's offer to move to the city with her. It was a big step, and he knew that returning to the city meant facing everything he had run away from. But he couldn't deny how much he loved Anna, and the thought of starting a new life with her excited him. He was ready, but just as he had made up his mind to follow her, everything changed. It happened one afternoon when Ethan had gone to meet Anna for a walk. They had planned to spend the day together, enjoying the simple pleasures of the village. But when he arrived at their usual meeting spot, he found a group of workers standing around a large truck, loading equipment. Confused, Ethan approached one of them. "What's going on?" The worker looked at him, then nodded toward Anna, who was standing nearby overseeing the work. "We're packing up the equipment for the project. Almost done here." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean packing up?" Before the man could answer, another worker nearby spoke up, glancing at him curiously. "You didn't know? Miss Adams is the one running the whole operation. She's the owner of the company." Ethan felt his world tilt. "Miss Adams," he whispered, barely able to form the words. The worker nodded. "Yeah, Diana Adams, she's the boss. She's been overseeing the installation here for weeks." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to process what he had just heard. The name sounded familiar, almost too familiar. Slowly, the pieces started falling into place, the workers who followed her every instruction, the way she had always seemed so comfortable around the construction crew. Suddenly, everything clicked. Anna wasn't just a construction accounting clerk. She was Diana Adams, and she had been hiding her identity from him all along. Ethan stood frozen, his thoughts racing as Diana walked over to him. She could see the confusion and hurt in his eyes, and knew that her secret was out. "Ethan, let me explain," she said softly, reaching out for his hand. Ethan took a step back, his mind spinning. You're Diana Adams, a tech billionaire." Diana nodded, her face filled with regret. "Yes. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to treat me any differently. I didn't want you to see me for my money or my status. I wanted you to see me for who I really am. Just Anna." Ethan's heart ached with the realization that the woman he had fallen in love with had been lying to him. But at the same time, he understood her reasons. After all, hadn't he been hiding his own secret as well? "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Diana stepped closer, her voice sincere. "Because I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want you to see me as some rich woman who's used to getting what she wants. I wanted you to see me. Just me." Ethan looked into her eyes and saw the honesty there. She wasn't like Tonya. She wasn't trying to manipulate him or use him. She had kept her secret because she wanted something real, just like he had. After a long pause, Ethan nodded. "I forgive you," he whispered, his heart softening. "I understand why you did it. I would have done the same thing." Diana let out a breath of relief, pulling him into her arms. "Thank you, Ethan. I don't want to lose you." Ethan held her close, feeling the weight of his own secret pressing down on him. He had been so focused on her deception that he had forgotten about his own. He knew that soon he would have to tell her the truth about who he really was. But for now, he decided to wait. "We'll talk about everything when we get to the city," Ethan said softly, his mind made up. They would face the truth together, one step at a time. The news of Anna's true identity spread through the village like wildfire. It wasn't long before everyone knew that the simple, hard-working accounting clerk at the construction site was actually Diana Adams, the self-made tech billionaire. The quiet woman who had helped install telecommunication devices in the village wasn't just any worker. She was one of the wealthiest and most successful people in the country. Julia was stunned when she heard the news. She had always viewed Anna as just another ordinary villager, someone without much to offer, certainly not someone to be admired. In her mind, Anna had been beneath her. She had mocked Ethan for choosing Anna. She sat in her spacious living room, her mind replaying all the times she had looked down on Anna. She had ignored her, treated her as though she wasn't worth her time, and now the woman she had dismissed as poor and insignificant was the billionaire everyone else dreamed of meeting. Julia's jealousy and frustration boiled over. But more than that, she felt a deep sense of regret. It wasn't just about the money. Julia realized that her obsession with wealth and status had blinded her to what truly mattered. She had been chasing the idea of the right match, thinking that her wealth would bring her happiness. But now she could see that her status was nothing compared to the quiet dignity and genuine kindness Anna had shown. Anna had been a diamond in disguise, while Julia had been chasing gold that was only coated, hiding the bitterness and sadness underneath. As Julia sat reflecting on the events that had unfolded, she realized something important. People were often more than they appeared. The world wasn't just about chasing wealth and status. It was about finding value in people's hearts, something she'd overlooked. Jude, on the other hand, was consumed with jealousy and bitterness. He couldn't believe that Anna, the woman he had viewed as beneath Julia, had turned out to be a billionaire. It stung his pride, knowing that Ethan had chosen Anna over Julia, especially now that her true identity was known. Jude had spent so much time trying to win Julia's affection with promises and flattery, but in the end, it hadn't mattered. He was left with nothing but bitterness as he watched Anna and Ethan leave the village together. Meanwhile, Ethan and Diana returned to the city. Their time in the village had brought them closer together, and Ethan felt more certain than ever that he had found someone he could truly love. Despite the whirlwind of emotions that came with discovering Diana's true identity, he had come to understand that her deception wasn't meant to hurt him. In fact, it had only made him love her more. Like him, Diana had wanted to be loved for who she truly was, not for her money or status. But the city brought with it a new set of challenges. As they entered the sprawling urban landscape, Diana's demeanor changed slightly. She was more serious, more thoughtful, and Ethan could tell she was worried about something. He tried not to let it bother him too much, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them, something he wasn't prepared for. It wasn't long before his fears were confirmed. Diana told Ethan that she wanted him to meet her family. She was serious about their relationship and wanted him to be a part of her life. Ethan, although nervous, was excited about the idea. He had never been formally introduced to anyone's family in this way before, and it made him feel hopeful about their future together. But when they arrived at Diana's family home, things quickly took a turn for the worse. Diana's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Adams, were not what Ethan had expected. They were wealthy, well-dressed, and had an air of sophistication that immediately put Ethan on edge. Mrs. Adams, in particular, seemed to eye Ethan with suspicion from the moment he walked through the door. "Mom, Dad, this is Ethan," Diana said, her voice filled with pride and affection as she introduced him. Ethan smiled warmly, but his heart sank as he noticed the coldness in their expressions. Mr. Adams didn't even try to hide his disapproval. His lips pressed into a thin line as he looked Ethan up and down. "And where exactly is Ethan from?" Mrs. Adams asked, her tone sharp and dismissive. Diana took a deep breath, ready to defend Ethan, but before she could speak, Mr. Adams cut in. "He's from some village," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "A poor orphan, from what I hear." "Come on, Dad," Diana said, bristling. "I can't believe you've been keeping tabs on me. You seem to know everything happening in my life." Ethan's heart stopped. He could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him, and he fought to keep his composure. How could they look at him like that, as though he were nothing? They didn't know his story, and yet they had already decided he wasn't good enough for their daughter. Mr. Adams continued, his voice growing colder with each word. "Diana, we've talked about this. You need to marry someone suitable, someone who comes from a family like ours. We've already told you that the son of Mr. Johnson is the perfect match, not this. Ethan." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. They were talking about him as though he weren't even there, as though he were nothing more than an inconvenience. His mind raced, his heart breaking with every second that passed. The son of Mr. Johnson, did they mean him? Ethan Johnson. They didn't even realize that he was the man they were speaking of, and he couldn't tell them the truth. Not yet. Diana stepped forward, her voice firm. "I don't care about Mr. Johnson's son, and I don't care about family connections. I love Ethan, and that's all that matters." Mrs. Adams shook her head, clearly displeased. "Diana, you can't be serious. He's not one of us. You have responsibilities, expectations. Marrying him would be a mistake." Ethan felt hurt. He had hoped that coming back to the city with Diana would mean a fresh start, but instead it felt like he was back in the world he had run from, where money and status meant everything. "I won't marry anyone but Ethan," Diana said, her voice unshakable. "I've made my choice." Ethan looked at Diana, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. She was standing by him, even in the face of her family's disapproval. But despite her loyalty, the judgment from her parents cut deep. Diana turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Ethan forced a smile, trying to be strong. "I'm fine," he whispered, though his heart ached. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he wasn't just some poor orphan from a village, that he was Ethan Johnson, the son of the man her parents wanted her to marry. But now wasn't the time. The shock of it all was too much. Later, Ethan sat quietly in his friend Emma's apartment, staring out the window at the busy city below. It had only been a few days since he had returned from the village with Anna, and already his life felt like it had been turned upside down. The weight of everything that had happened hung heavy on his heart. His relationship with Anna, Diana, had been unexpected. They had met in the most unassuming way, in a quiet village far from the world of wealth and status. But now the truth was coming to light, and it was more complicated than he could have ever anticipated. Anna was actually Diana Adams, the very woman his parents had wanted him to meet, and he was Ethan Johnson, the son of the richest man in the city, the very person her parents wanted her to marry, though they had no idea yet. It was almost too much to process. For years, Ethan had done everything he could to keep his identity private. He had always been uncomfortable with the spotlight that came with his family's wealth, and had gone out of his way to live a life away from the expectations of the elite. Unlike many other wealthy heirs and heiresses, Ethan had never been interested in high society events or forming connections with other elite families. He had always tried to keep a low profile, even declining public appearances that could have made him more recognizable. He had built a life of anonymity, one where people didn't associate his name with his father's fortune. But now his carefully guarded secret was on the brink of being exposed. Sighing deeply, Ethan leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. How had things gotten so complicated? His relationship with Anna, Diana, was real, and his feelings for her were deeper than anything he had ever felt before. Just as Ethan was lost in thought, his phone buzzed on the table beside him. He glanced at it, expecting a message from Emma, but his heart skipped a beat when he saw the caller ID. Mrs. Adams. Ethan stared at the phone for a moment, unsure of what to do. He hadn't expected to hear from Diana's mother after their disastrous first meeting. With a deep breath, he answered the call. "Hello," he said cautiously. "Ethan?" Mrs. Adams's voice was cold but controlled. "I think we need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? There's a cafe on Fifth Avenue, the Lux Cafe. I'll see you there at 10 a.m. Ethan's stomach twisted with anxiety. He hadn't expected Mrs. Adams to reach out to him, and judging by the tone of her voice, this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. But he knew he had no choice. He had to face this head-on. "I'll be there," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the Lux Cafe, a high-end spot known for its elegant decor and expensive clientele. As he stepped inside, he felt a familiar sense of discomfort. This was the world he had been born into, but had always felt out of place in, a world of luxury and exclusivity that seemed more focused on appearances than anything real. Mrs. Adams was already seated at a corner table, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. "Thank you for coming," Mrs. Adams said coolly, gesturing for Ethan to sit down. Ethan sat, his nerves on edge. He could feel the weight of Mrs. Adams' gaze on him, measuring him, judging him. "I'll get straight to the point," Mrs. Adams began, her voice sharp. "You seem like a nice enough boy, but my daughter has no business being with someone like you. Diana has responsibilities, expectations. She comes from a family with a certain level of influence, and she needs to marry someone who can match that." Ethan's chest tightened, but he remained silent, listening as Mrs. Adams continued. "I know you come from a small village," she said, her tone dismissive. "And I'm sure you think you love her, but you're not right for her. You can't give her the kind of life she needs, the kind of future she deserves. So I'm asking you, no, I'm telling you to walk away. Just find yourself a nice humble village girl and settle down with her." Ethan felt a wave of anger and hurt rise within him. but he kept his voice calm. "I love Diana," he said quietly. "And she loves me." Mrs. Adams's eyes narrowed. "Love is not enough, my dear. Not in our world. Diana needs someone who can support her, someone who can match her status. You'll only hold her back." Ethan clenched his fists under the table, fighting to keep his emotions in check. He had expected something like this, but hearing it from Mrs. Adams's mouth still stung deeply. "And if love isn't enough to make you leave," Mrs. Adams added, her voice dripping with disdain, "perhaps this will help." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Ethan stared at the envelope, realizing what was inside. "Money. I'm offering you this to go away," Mrs. Adams said coldly. "Take it. Disappear. Find someone else. This is enough for you to set up something for yourself and find a girl. You don't belong in my daughter's circle." Ethan's eyes remained fixed on the envelope. He had expected disapproval, but this, being offered money to disappear from Diana's life, was beyond anything he could have imagined. For a moment, the room around him seemed to blur, and all he could feel was the weight of the insult, the sharp sting of Mrs. Adams' words cutting into him. Slowly he lifted his gaze to meet her cold, expectant eyes. "I don't want your money," Ethan said firmly, pushing the envelope back across the table. "You can't buy me off." Mrs. Adams's expression hardened, her lips thinning with frustration. "Do you honestly think you can give her what she needs? Diana has a future ahead of her, one that involves a man of substance, of class. You're nothing but a poor boy from a village. You have nothing to offer her." Ethan's heart raced, but he refused to let his emotions get the best of him. He had come too far, endured too much, to be broken by someone who knew nothing about his true identity. He remained silent, his hands clenched in his lap. He had never wanted to reveal his identity, never wanted to use his name or his wealth to prove himself. But now, sitting across from Mrs. Adams, he realized that things had gone too far. He couldn't keep hiding who he was, not if he wanted a future with Diana. Mrs. Adams stood up, her patience clearly wearing thin. "This is your last chance," she said sharply. "Take the money and leave, or you'll regret it." Ethan stood as well, his heart pounding but his mind made up. "I love Diana, and I'm not going anywhere. She chose me because of who I am, not because of my status or my background." Mrs. Adams's face twisted in anger. "You'll regret this, boy," she spat, before turning and walking away, leaving Ethan standing alone at the table. As the door of the cafe closed behind Mrs. Adams, Ethan felt the weight of the conversation settle heavily on his shoulders. He stood there for a moment longer, gathering his thoughts. Mrs. Adams's words echoed in his mind. Something else began to rise within him, a sense of resolve. It was time to reveal the truth. He had hidden who he was for so long, but this was no longer just about protecting his anonymity. This was about fighting for the woman he loved, and for the future they both deserved. With a deep breath, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed the familiar number of his parents. The phone rang twice before his mother's voice came through, warm and familiar. "Ethan, darling, is everything okay?" Mrs. Johnson asked, her tone concerned. "Mom, I need to talk to you," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly but filled with determination. "I need to set things straight. It's time I tell Diana the truth about who I am." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Ethan could almost feel his mother's surprise. "The truth about who you are? What do you mean, darling?" "I've fallen in love, Mom," Ethan confessed, his heart pounding as the words spilled out. "And the woman I've fallen in love with? She's Diana Adams, the same Diana you and Dad wanted me to meet. But she doesn't know I'm Ethan Johnson. She thinks I'm just a boy from a village, an orphan. Her parents..." His voice caught in his throat. "They don't want her to be with me. They think I'm not good enough for her." There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then his mother spoke softly. "Ethan, darling, you've always done things your way, and we've always respected that. But if you love this woman, if you truly want a life with her, then you need to tell her the truth. She deserves to know who you are, and you deserve to be loved for all of who you are, not just part of it." His mother's words offering him the reassurance he needed. "You're right, Mom. It's time. I'll talk to your father," Mrs. Johnson added gently. "We'll support you, Ethan, no matter what." "Thank you, Mom," Ethan said. I'm going to tell her everything. I just hope it's not too late." After ending the call, Ethan felt a sense of clarity wash over him. The truth, long hidden, would soon come to light. And though the thought of revealing his identity to Diana, of telling her that he was the very man her parents wanted her to marry, was terrifying, he knew it was the right thing to do. Ethan sat quietly in the back of a sleek black car as it navigated the busy city streets, his heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. The glittering lights of the city reflected off the windows, casting a soft glow inside the car, but all he could think about was what lay ahead. Tonight was the night he would finally reveal everything, not just to Diana, but to the world. Diana had invited him to a charity auction, a high society event that was one of the biggest nights of the year for the city's elite. When she asked him to come, he had felt a rush of both excitement and dread. He loved Diana deeply, but he had been hiding a part of himself for so long that the weight of his secret had become unbearable. He couldn't keep pretending anymore. For weeks, he had struggled with how to tell her the truth, that he wasn't just some boy from a village, but Ethan Johnson, the son of the wealthiest man in the city, the man her parents had been pushing her to meet, the very same person they had wanted her to marry, though neither of them had known it at the time. When Diana had first invited him to the auction, he had been hesitant. He wasn't one for grand events or mingling with the wealthy elite. But as the days passed, and he considered how much longer he could keep hiding the truth, he realized that this event might be the perfect opportunity. Maybe revealing his identity at such a public event would make things easier, less personal. After all, he hadn't been able to find the right words to confess to Diana, and this way he wouldn't have to hide any longer. So he called his parents and filled them in. He would use this night, the auction, to reveal who he truly was, not just to Diana, but to everyone. It was time for the charade to end. As the car pulled up to the grand venue, Ethan took a deep breath and smoothed down the elegant suit he was wearing. It was simple, yet classy, chosen with care. The driver opened the door, and Ethan stepped out onto the red carpet leading into the ballroom, his heart racing as he took in the grand scene before him. The venue was breathtaking, with chandeliers glittering like stars and a red carpet lined with photographers and reporters. Elite guests arrived in glamorous gowns and tailored suits, flashing smiles for the cameras as they entered the event. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this, but tonight he would have no choice. Tonight, everyone would know who he was, and there would be no turning back. As he made his way into the ballroom, the sight of Diana waiting for him by the entrance made his heart skip a beat. She looked radiant in a tailored, elegant gown, her smile lighting up her face when she saw him. He felt a momentary pang of guilt, knowing that she still didn't know the full truth about him. But soon, that would all change. Diana approached him, her eyes filled with affection. "You look handsome," she said, taking his hand. Ethan smiled, though his nerves remained just beneath the surface. "Thank you. You look amazing too." Together they made their way through the grand hall, where the city's wealthiest families mingled over champagne and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. The evening was filled with excitement, and the grand auction was set to begin shortly. But all Ethan could think about was the moment that was fast approaching, the moment when he would step into the light and reveal his true identity. The auction began with a flurry of activity. Rare items were brought to the stage, with elite guests bidding astronomical sums for paintings, jewelry, and luxury experiences. The room buzzed with energy, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere. He felt the weight of his secret pressing down on him, and he knew the time was coming. Then, as the auctioneer called for a brief intermission, the host of the event, a famous socialite, stepped forward with a bright smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice ringing through the hall, "we are honored to have some very special guests with us tonight. Please welcome Ethan Johnson, son of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, who have been key supporters of tonight's event." The applause was polite at first, but as Ethan stood and made his way toward the stage, a ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. Many of the guests had never seen him before. He had always kept a low profile and avoided public appearances. But tonight, he was stepping out of the shadows. As he joined his parents, the shock on Mr. and Mrs. Adams' faces was obvious. Mrs. Adams' eyes widened in disbelief, and Mr. Adams looked utterly stunned. They had spent weeks dismissing Ethan as a poor orphan, someone unworthy of their daughter, but now, seeing him standing beside the wealthiest family in the room, they realized the truth. Ethan Johnson wasn't just some boy from a village. He was the son of the richest man in the city, the very man they had wanted their daughter to marry all along. Mrs. Adams' hand flew to her mouth, and Mr. Adams exchanged a look of shock with his wife. Diana, meanwhile, stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief, as she watched the scene unfold before her. After the applause died down, Ethan wasted no time. He quickly made his way toward Diana, his heart racing as he approached her. "Diana," he said softly, reaching for her hand, "I need to explain." Without a word, Diana led him outside, away from the prying eyes of the guests. They stepped onto a quiet terrace where the cool night air hit them both, and Ethan felt the weight of the moment settle over him. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Ethan began, his voice trembling slightly. "I never meant to deceive you. I just didn't know how to tell you the truth. When we met in the village, I was trying to live a simple life. I didn't want anyone to know who I really was, especially not you. I wanted to find love, real love, not based on wealth or status." Diana stared at him, still processing the truth. "So, you're Ethan Johnson, the one my parents have been talking about?" Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with emotion. "Yes. I didn't know who you really were either, not at first, but once I found out, I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd think I was hiding it on purpose." Diana let out a long breath, running a hand through her hair. "This is a lot to take in, but I get it. I really do." Ethan blinked in surprise. "You're not upset?" Diana smiled, reaching for his hand. "Ethan, I was pretending to be someone else when we met too. I didn't tell you who I really was because I wanted to live a simpler life for a while. I didn't want people to see me as the billionaire tech woman. Just like you didn't want to be seen as the heir." Ethan's heart swelled with relief and love as Diana pulled him into her arms. "So we're both guilty," he said softly, resting his head against her shoulder. Diana chuckled, pressing a kiss to his lips. "I guess so." They stood there for a moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the weight of their secrets finally lifted. They had both hidden parts of themselves out of fear, but now there were no more secrets between them. They were just Ethan and Diana, two people who had found love in the most unexpected way. "I love you," Ethan whispered, looking up into her eyes. "I love you too," Diana replied, leaning down to capture his lips in a soft, tender kiss. Inside the ballroom, the mood had shifted. Mr. and Mrs. Adams, who had been so adamant about keeping Ethan away from their daughter, now approached his parents with sheepish smiles. "We had no idea," Mrs. Adams said, her voice filled with regret. "We're so sorry for the way we treated your son. We misjudged him completely." Mr. Johnson smiled warmly. "No harm done. What matters now is that they found each other, and that is what we intended all along." As the families reconciled, the news of Ethan and Diana's engagement spread through the room, filling the air with excitement and joy. The elite guests who had once gossiped about Ethan's humble background now whispered in awe about the union of two of the city's most powerful families. A few months later, Ethan and Diana stood hand in hand at their wedding, surrounded by their loved ones. Their journey had been filled with secrets, misunderstandings, and challenges, but through it all, they had found something more valuable than wealth or status. They had found love, the kind of love that saw beyond appearances and into the heart. As they exchanged vows and kissed under the bright sky, they knew that they had learned a lesson that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Never judge someone based on appearances, because sometimes the most precious treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places. And so they began their new life together, united by love, trust, and the knowledge that they had found something real.